Chapter 1. The Serpent's Memory. The Desert View Inn felt like a liminal space, caught somewhere between the past and the present. The cracked vinyl chairs and faded curtains told stories of decades past, while the woman sitting across from Ian Carter seemed to carry millennia. Lazerta, as she called herself, exuded an unsettling calm. Her posture was impossibly still, her slit-pupilled eyes unblinking as she studied him. Ian fidgeted with his pen, acutely aware of the tape recorder capturing every second of their exchange. "Let's start with something simple," he said, forcing his voice to steady. "Who are you?" Her lips curled into a faint smile. "That's not a simple question at all, Mr. Carter, but for your sake, let's say I'm someone who's seen too much, someone who spent lifetimes trying to save a species that may not want saving." Ian frowned. "Save us? From what?" "From yourselves," she replied. Her words hung in the air like smoke. Ian waited, his pen poised, but Lazerta didn't elaborate. Instead, she removed her gloves. Her hands, if they could be called that, were clawed, with scales that shimmered faintly under the dim light. Ian's breath caught, and he instinctively leaned back. "You're not human," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," she admitted, "I'm not." Ian's mind raced. He'd spent years chasing UFO sightings and digging into conspiracy theories, but nothing had prepared him for this. An actual extraterrestrial, sitting across from him, speaking English like it was her first language. "What are you?" he asked. Lazerta leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "I am one of the last of my kind, a species you call reptilians, though we were not always so monstrous in your myths. We were created by the Anunnaki to enforce their rule over Earth, to keep your kind in line." Ian scribbled furiously in his notebook. "The Anunnaki? You're saying the legends are real?" "More than real," she said. "They are your creators. They shaped your DNA, gave you language, and taught you how to build. But they didn't do it out of kindness. You were made to serve them." Ian stared at her, his pen frozen mid-sentence. Why would they create us just to enslave us? Lazerta's gaze softened, a flicker of something almost human in her expression. "Because your kind is more dangerous than you realize. The Anunnaki knew that, even as they shaped you. They've always feared what you might become." Chapter 2. Ian's World. Ian's apartment in Albuquerque was a mess of cluttered notebooks, taped together news clippings, and coffee-stained printouts of conspiracy theories. The walls were lined with pinned maps and red string connecting different locations: Roswell, Chichen Itza, Stonehenge, Giza. He'd spent years chasing stories that most people dismissed as lunacy, but now, for the first time, he had something real. He dropped his bag onto the couch and replayed the interview with Lazerta on his tape recorder. Her voice filled the room, low and calm, recounting the creation of humanity by an alien race. "You were designed to work, to mine, to build, and when you became too much to handle, you were destroyed." Ian paused the tape and ran a hand through his hair. It sounded absurd, yet the conviction in her voice, the detail in her story, it was impossible to ignore. A knock at the door startled him. Ian glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. He opened the door cautiously and his stomach sank. A man in a dark suit stood on the porch, his face blank and emotionless. Behind him, a black SUV idled at the curb. "Mr. Carter," the man said, his voice devoid of warmth. "We need to talk." Chapter 3. The God King of Egypt. 2 days later, Ian sat across from Lazerta again, this time in a diner on the outskirts of town. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on the peeling vinyl booths. Lazerta was dressed in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat, her reptilian features mostly hidden. "I need more proof," Ian said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Lazerta smirked. "You're not ready for proof, Mr. Carter, but I'll tell you a story." She leaned back in her seat, her eyes distant. Long ago in the sands of Egypt, there was a man named Akhenaten, a pharaoh unlike any other. He rejected the old gods and worshipped only Aten, the sun disk. The people hated him for it, but they didn't understand. Akhenaten wasn't mad, he was guided. "Guided by who?" Ian asked. "By me," Lazerta said simply. Ian blinked. "You? Why?" "Because the Anunnaki were planning to return," she said, "and Akhenaten needed to unify his people. The old gods divided them. Aten was meant to bring them together, to prepare them for what was coming. What happened?" Lazerta's expression darkened. The priesthood overthrew him, erased his name from history. Humanity wasn't ready to listen. Ian scribbled in his notebook, his mind racing. "So, you've been doing this for thousands of years." "Trying to stop them? I've been trying," she said bitterly. "But humanity has a habit of sabotaging itself." Chapter 4. The threat emerges. That night, Ian's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Carter," a cold voice said, "you've gone too far." The line went dead. Ian stared at his phone, his heart pounding. Moments later, his apartment was flooded with light. He ran to the window and saw the unmistakable silhouette of a helicopter hovering above the street. Its searchlight swept across his living room, illuminating the maps and clippings pinned to the walls. Ian grabbed his laptop and recorder, shoving them into a bag. He bolted out the back door, narrowly avoiding the black SUVs now parked in front of his building. As he disappeared into the night, Ian realized one thing. Someone was watching. And they didn't want him to know the truth. Chapter 5. A World of Lies. Ian began experiencing vivid dreams of towering beings with glowing eyes, of civilizations crumbling under the weight of alien ships blotting out the sky. Lazerta confirmed what he feared. The Anunnaki were trying to manipulate him, to frighten him into abandoning the story. "They know you're listening," she said, "and they'll do whatever it takes to stop you." Lazerta's warnings grew more urgent. She told him about the Anunnaki's most sacred artifact, the beacon, hidden in Antarctica. If activated, it would expose their plans and disrupt the reset cycle. But reaching it would mean defying not only the Anunnaki but also the human governments working to suppress the truth. Chapter 6. The Final Journey. The flight to Antarctica was suffocatingly silent. Ian sat beside Lazerta, the hum of the military-grade plane their only companion. They had stolen it from a shadowy airfield after narrowly evading a convoy of black SUVs and an unmarked helicopter. The cold, barren expanse of the ice continent stretched endlessly beneath them. "You've been quiet," Ian said, his voice breaking the tension. Lazerta didn't turn to him. Her clawed fingers traced faint patterns on the frosted window, her green eyes distant. "Every time I've tried to stop them, I've failed," she said. "The cycles have always continued. This might be the last chance we have to break it." Ian frowned. "You've mentioned cycles, but you never explained why they're doing this. Why create us just to destroy us?" Lazerta's gaze snapped to him. "Because you're a puzzle," she said. "Humanity wasn't just created to mine gold or build monuments. You were designed to evolve, to see if you could surpass your creators. But the Anunnaki, They're afraid of you. Every time you get close to outgrowing their control, they reset you." Ian shivered. "And what happens if we break free?" Lazerta's lips pressed into a thin line. "If you win, you inherit everything. The knowledge, the technology, even the stars. If you fail, there's nothing left." The beacon lay hidden beneath the Antarctic ice, sealed within an alien structure buried for tens of thousands of years. The entrance, marked by a faintly glowing sigil identical to the ones Lazerta had shown him, required her unique DNA to unlock. The moment she pressed her hand against the glyph, the ice cracked, and the ground shook violently. A metallic groan echoed through the air as a passageway opened, revealing a cavern bathed in pale blue light. "Stay close," Lazerta said, her voice tense. As they descended, Ian marveled at the alien technology. Walls of smooth, reflective metal stretched into infinity, pulsing with faint energy. Symbols he couldn't decipher danced across the surfaces. "This place," he whispered. "It feels alive." "It is," Lazerta said. "The beacon isn't just a device, it's an interface, connected directly to the Anunnaki's communication network. Once activated, it will broadcast a signal across the galaxy." "To who?" Ian asked. "To everyone," she said grimly. "Their allies, their enemies, and every other race they've experimented on." Chapter 7. The Truth Revealed. In the heart of the cavern lay the beacon, a massive obelisk-like structure that seemed to hum with ancient power. Its surface was covered in shifting glyphs, glowing brighter as Lazerta approached. "This is it," she said, her voice heavy. "The moment of truth." Ian hesitated. "What aren't you telling me, Lazerta?" She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "The beacon doesn't just warn the Anunnaki's enemies. It rewrites the cycle. It will send a signal that disrupts their control over humanity, but it will also mark this planet as a threat. If they decide we're too dangerous to keep alive, they'll destroy Earth completely." Ian's stomach dropped. Then why activate it? "Because doing nothing guarantees the same outcome," Lazerta said. "This is the only chance to give humanity the choice to fight back." She reached out to touch the beacon, but Ian grabbed her arm. "Wait," he said. "If you've been fighting them for so long, why now? Why this time?" Lazerta hesitated, and Ian saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Guilt. "Because," she said softly, "I helped design the first cycle. I didn't just enforce their rule. I was part of the council that decided humanity's fate. I was one of them." Ian. Chapter 8. The Unexpected Choice. Ian stumbled back, his mind reeling. "You... what? You were one of them? You're the reason we're here?" "I left them," Lazerta said quickly, her voice desperate. "When I saw what they were doing, I couldn't be part of it anymore. I tried to save your kind. That's why I've been hunted for millennia. But I was complicit in the beginning, and I can't undo that." Ian shook his head, anger rising in his chest. "You've been manipulating me this whole time. You didn't tell me because you needed me to trust you. Because I knew you wouldn't help if you knew the whole truth," she admitted. "But it doesn't change what's at stake. You've seen their power, Ian. You've felt their control. If we don't do this, billions will die anyway. At least this way, humanity has a chance." Ian stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of fear, betrayal, and determination. Then he looked at the beacon. "What happens if I activate it?" he asked. Lazerta hesitated. "You'll interface with it. It will use your consciousness as a conduit to deliver the signal. But it's dangerous. The energy might..." "Kill me," Ian finished. Lazerta nodded. But you'll save your species, the climax, the interface. Ian stepped toward the beacon, his hands trembling. The glyphs on its surface shifted, responding to his presence. As he touched it, a surge of energy coursed through him and his vision exploded with light. He saw everything: the creation of humanity, the rise and fall of civilizations, the Anunnaki Council deliberating over Earth's future. And then he saw something else. Something Lazerta hadn't told him. There was no cycle. The resets weren't about evolution or rebellion. They were about containment. Humanity had already surpassed the Anunnaki once, tens of thousands of years ago. The Anunnaki wiped them out and started over, fearing what humanity might become if left unchecked. "Now you understand," a voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't Lazerta, it was the Anunnaki, speaking directly to him through the beacon. "Your species is not a creation, it is a weapon, and you are its trigger, the ending, the awakening." Ian screamed as the energy surged through him, his body convulsing. The beacon's light grew brighter, shooting into the sky. Lazerta called his name, but he couldn't hear her. When the light faded, Ian collapsed to the ground. Lazerta rushed to his side, but he was already changing. His eyes glowed with the same reptilian hue as hers, his skin rippling with faint scales. "What's happening?" he gasped. "The truth," Lazerta whispered, her voice trembling. "You're not fully human, Ian. None of you are. You're part of something far older, something they couldn't control." Ian looked up at the beacon, now pulsing with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. "What did I do?" "You woke them up," Lazerta said, her voice filled with both fear and awe. Above them, the sky tore open, and a fleet of ships descended. Not Anunnaki, but something far more ancient. Something humanity had once been part of, long before the resets began. And as the ships approached, Ian felt a voice deep within him, resonating in his bones. "Welcome back." Epilogue: The Forgotten War. Months later, Earth is unrecognizable. Nations have collapsed as humanity prepares for its greatest battle. One not of survival, but of ascension. Ian, no longer fully human, stands at the forefront, leading a species awakening to its true potential. And far above, the Anunnaki Council watches in silence, knowing they've lost control of their greatest creation.